Welcome to Scary Stories. In response to our last Sleep Stories special, some of you sent in some bedtime stories that you've been told as a kid. We're going to start off this episode with those, then continue with some other stories you sent us, finishing up with some new scary bedtime stories for all ages, read in the rain, that I personally have collected and written. I hope you're comfortable, because I'm ready to get started. Story 1 tonight is from someone who told me to call him Dr. Squeeny. Dr. Squeeny is recalling a scary story about a dogman type creature that his uncle warned him about. And we're going to call this one The Hairy Hound Man from Hell. Dear Scary Stories NYC. When I was a kid, my Uncle Louie would tell me and my brother scary stories that he said really happened to friends of his friends. Sometimes he said the stories happened to him personally, and his favorite of those kinds of stories to tell were the ones about a particular local dogman-type critter, alleged to live in the woods outside the town down south that he came from. Now, my Uncle Louie passed on years ago, but I'm going to try to recreate the Louie experience for you. Pretend you're me back then, a really dumb little kid who believed everything his uncle told him. Get comfortable. And pretend I'm Uncle Louie, and the time is decades ago when I was young. Once upon a time, in the dark woods outside of Kingston Springs, Tennessee, there lived a creature that was half man, half hound, and all evil. It was known as the Hairy Hound Man from Hell, and it was said to live deep in the forest, far away from any human civilization, guarding the entrance to hell itself. Once upon a time indeed, but this once upon a time was during my childhood. As a kid, I had heard tales of the Hound Man. They were whispered in hushed tones around campfires and passed on from one child to the next, like some kind of terrifying secret. The story of the legend was that when we pass away, we're forced to live in the forest with the Hound Man. We're dragged into his cave and down to hell itself. I worried that I could get lost in the woods and end up there accidentally. These were genuine fears of mine when I was very young. Adults warned us not to stray too far into the woods at night, lest the Hound Man come for us. And they warned us not to have unclean thoughts in our head, lest the Hound Man come into our towns, into our homes, looking for us. Now, I didn't even know what that meant, unclean thoughts. I figured it had something to do with taking a bath, and since I had thought about taking baths the minimum amount I was allowed, I wasn't concerned about it. But, like all children, I was curious, especially about the idea of a monster man living in the woods outside of my town. As I grew older, I became determined to find the Hound Man and see for myself whether the stories were true. So one night, armed only with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, I set out into the forest. At first it was all fun and games. I laughed at the way my flashlight bounced off the trees, and I pretended to be a brave explorer. But as I ventured deeper into the woods, the atmosphere began to change. The stillness became oppressive, and the darkness seemed to close in all around me. And then I saw it. At first I thought it was just a trick of the light, or my overactive imagination. But as I drew closer, I could see the shape of a huge, fur-covered beast emerging from the shadows. Its eyes glinted in the darkness, and its jaws were lined with razor-sharp teeth. It had a head shaped very much like a canine, but the rest of its body to me resembled some kind of an Olympic athlete covered in dog fur. I mean, the legs weren't really human, but still the torso, the arms to each side, the overall presentation was that of a humanoid, even if the head and feet looked entirely different. You know, I don't think I ever really expected to find the thing, but this definitely had to be the Hairy Hound Man, and that meant I must be near the entrance to hell itself. I wanted to run, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. The Hound Man walked toward me, its footsteps heavy and deliberate. Each step seemed to shake the ground beneath me, and I could feel its hot breath on my face. In that moment, I knew that the stories were true. The Hound Man was real, and it had come for me. It snarled in my face, and I could feel its hot, sour breath on my skin. The Hound Man's eyes burned into mine like hot coals, and I knew its intentions. It had come to devour my soul. I closed my eyes expecting to feel its jaws around my neck any second. But when I opened them again, the Hound Man was gone. I was alone in the dark forest, trembling with fear and relief. And that, my children, is why I am such a clean person. I take a bath every day, and when I do, I think clean thoughts about soap and soap bubbles, shampoo and toothpaste. That's how to keep the Hound Man away, kids. You must never think unclean thoughts. The hairy Hound Man from hell is always watching, and he will not hesitate to come for you if you bother him too much. So be good, even in your dreams, and sleep tight. Otherwise the bed bugs will bite you all over all night. The end. The LIE Cant. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I was told this story by my mother, and I tell it to my kids now. I think it makes for a great bedtime story, especially for people who like to stretch the truth sometimes. I'll tell it to you the same way I tell it to my kids. Once upon a time, in a small town nestled among the mountains, there roamed a subspecies of the infamous lichen, or werewolf, called the LIE Cant. This creature was fiercely intelligent, powerful, and unpredictable, but it had one significant weakness that made it even more terrifying. It couldn't tolerate lies or mistruths. It was said that if a person lied in the presence of a LIE Cant, it would go into a furious rage, attacking them, tearing them apart with its razor-sharp claws. Everybody feared the LIE Cant. Many people warned their children of the creature, warning them not to lie or mislead anyone or risk falling victim to this mysterious monster. But no one could cite any actual sightings until one fateful night. A group of friends were traveling back home from a nearby town on the train. They laughed and joked around, not a care in the world, unaware of the danger they were about to encounter. Suddenly there was a loud rumble, and the train derailed, throwing everyone out of their seats. The carriages tumbled down the mountainside, and screams filled the air. Amid the chaos, a LIE Cant appeared out of nowhere, its lupine form towering over the wreckage, and its eyes flashing red in the darkness. It sniffed around, smelling for signs of deceit, while the screams of the injured filled its ears. The animal picked its way through the rubble, searching for survivors. Finally, the LIE Cant came across two friends, Liam and Larry, both of them caught in the wreckage, unable to free themselves. The huge muscle-bound werewolf easily moved heavy equipment off of the two, freeing them in the process. Then, before anyone knew what was happening, it grabbed Liam by the scruff of his neck, threw him into a gunny sack over its shoulder, and bolted away into the wilderness, ignoring Larry's screams of protest. The LIE Cant had saved Larry, considering him honest, but it didn't tolerate liars, and it knew Liam was not honest. Even the pleas of his honest friend Larry couldn't save him. From that day on, the tale of the LIE Cant circulated around the town. People whispered about it and warned their kids, telling them never to deceive or lie, lest they encourage the wrath of the LIE Cant. So beware, my children. Never lie. Never seek to deceive. You never know when the LIE Cant might be lurking nearby, ready to pounce and take you away. My wife is a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I am an independent research scientist of some note, and so I need to send this to you anonymously. I can't sleep. Every night I lie awake, staring into the darkness and listening to the silence of my empty house. It's hard to relax when I know that out there somewhere, she is prowling around under the moonlight. My wife, the werewolf. It's all my fault, you see. I was always fascinated by the supernatural and the unknown. I couldn't resist the temptation to experiment with dark magic, using my scientific background and perspective, and I paid the price for it. One night under the full moon, I performed a spell that turned my wife and myself into beasts of the night. She was beautiful and terrifying all at once, with an otherworldly strength and a voracious appetite for blood. I never loved her more than in that moment, and I expected us to have a long future together. At first it was thrilling. We roamed the countryside, hunting and howling at the moon. But soon I began to see the fear in her eyes. She didn't want this cursed existence. She wanted to be human again. And so I made the difficult decision to undo the spell. But something went wrong. It was simple to turn myself back into my human form. But when I tried to reverse the magic on my wife, I discovered that I couldn't. I can't explain why, but it seemed that my wife was stuck as a werewolf forever. And worse, she's furious with me. She knows that I'm the one who brought this curse upon her, and she can't forgive me. So my wife left me, leaving me behind with my guilt and my fears. I've been trying to find her ever since, but she's too clever for me. She avoids the cities and the towns, preferring to lurk in the forests and the hills. I know that she's dangerous, but I can't bring myself to turn her in. She's still my wife, after all, even if she's not human anymore. And so I lie here in bed, trembling with fear and longing for her return. I know that it will be the end of me if she ever finds me, but I can't help but hope for her embrace anyway. Maybe someday she'll forgive me. Maybe someday she'll come back to me. Until then, I'll just keep watching and waiting. The howls in the night remind me that she's out there, somewhere, and I can't help but wonder what she's doing, and what, or who, she's hunting. The horrible thing in the mansion. When I was very young, I grew up in a sleepy little town nestled in the heart of the countryside. On the outskirts of this town stood a large, eerie mansion. It was said that the house had been abandoned for decades, and no one had dared enter its gates for just as long. Many years ago, my father came into my bedroom one night and sat down on the edge of my bed. He took a deep breath and began to tell me a tale that sent shivers down my spine. It was a story about that very mansion. My father had been a young boy at the time, no older than I was when he told me this story. He had been playing with his friends in the fields just outside the town when they decided to explore the abandoned mansion. As they got closer to it, they could feel a chill in the air, and the hair on their neck stood on end. The boys hesitated, but eventually, curiosity got the better of them, and they climbed over the gate and into the yard. As they made their way to the front door, they could see that the house was in a state of complete disrepair. The windows were broken, and the walls were crumbling. A rat scurried across the doorstep, and my father and his friends all jumped back in surprise. But as they were about to turn and run, they saw something inside that made them stop in their tracks. There, in the shadows of the old mansion, stood a figure. It was tall and thin, with long bony arms that hung down to its knees. My father and his friends were frozen with fear, unable to move or speak. The figure stepped forward, and its eyes glowed red in the darkness. It let out a blood-curdling scream, and my father and his friends bolted for the gate. As they ran back toward the safety of the town, they could hear the figure chasing them, its footsteps pounding on the ground behind them. Those boys didn't stop till they were safely back home, and they had no idea where the figure had gone. For years, my father refused to talk about what happened that night. But as I grew older, he finally shared the tale with me. And to this day, I can't help but wonder what really happened in that old mansion. Was it just a figment of my father's imagination? Or was there really some thing lurking inside it? I may never personally know the answer, but one thing's for sure. That mansion still stands outside the town I grew up in. And it still gives me chills every time I pass it by on the highway at night. The Big Burly Dog Man. It's hard to believe that just a few years ago, I lived a life of luxury. I had everything I ever wanted. Nice clothes, fancy cars, beautiful women. I never had to pay for anything either. It was all handed to me on a silver platter. When you've got more than you need, people always want to give you even more than that. But then, in the blink of an eye, it all changed. The economy took a turn for the worst, in a way I hadn't prepared for. My 3 thriving businesses all collapsed within 2 years of each other, and I lost everything. I was left with nothing but the clothes on my back, and nowhere to go. So I headed out into the woods along the railroad tracks, hoping to find a secluded spot where I could hide away from society. It was there that I met him, the Big Burly Dog Man creature. At first I was scared. I had never seen anything like him before, but he just liked me and he started to follow me around, almost like he was protecting me. Soon he was bringing me food, scraps of meat and bits of bread that he had found while scavenging. He would lay them at my feet, and then stay with me as I ate. I started to find comfort in his presence. I began to think of him as a friend, almost like a pet. Or maybe I was his pet. He was always there when I needed him, bringing me food and protecting me from harm. I don't know how long we lived like that, me and the dog man. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I never wanted to leave his side. But then one day, I woke up, and he was gone. I don't know where he went, and I don't know why he left. But I knew that I would miss him. My friend, my protector, the one who would save me from death on the streets. Now I'm in recovery, thanks to my niece who's decided to try to help me get back on my feet. But I'll never forget the Big Burly Dog Man who once saved my life. Hey, if you like listening to scary stories, there's a whole world of scary audiobooks available for you to listen to right now by top authors just as good as me, read by talented readers a lot better than me. And you can listen to a couple of them for free if you click the link in our description and maybe in our pinned comment, and check out Audible for free. Here, look, I'm searching Amazon for Cryptozoology Stories Audible, and we got all these cool looking things to listen to. Look, here's American Monsters, that's co-written by Linda Godfrey, the author who of course made Dogman famous back 20 years ago. You can see it costs $17 for the paperback, and it's $8 or so for the Kindle, but you can have the entire book read to you professionally for free, and you don't have to strain your eyes if you click the link in our description and get the free Audible trial. I am a werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC. As I lay here in the darkness, feeling my fur rise up from my body, I know that I must share the truth about werewolves. You see, most people believe that werewolves are just humans who transform into wolves on the full moon. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Let me tell you something that will keep you up at night. True werewolves are not humans at all, but wolves who have learned to disguise themselves as humans in order to interact with your culture and institutions from within. We are among you, but you would never know it. The full moon is just a myth, a way for us to blend in with the human population. Our transformations are not triggered by the lunar cycle, but by the primal urges that come with being a wolf. When the hunger takes over, we must feed, and there's nothing like the hunt to satisfy our need for blood and flesh. But we are not mindless beasts. We are cunning and intelligent, able to outsmart even the most astute humans. We live in the shadows, watching, waiting, always ready to strike when the time is right. There are those who seek to expose us, to reveal our true nature to the world. They do not understand the danger they are inviting into their lives, for we are not creatures to be messed with, and once we set our sights on someone, there's no escaping us. And the reason the werewolf is the most feared of predators is that we strike those who are asleep. We smell your dreams. We can see and hear them too, from miles off. We never need to put ourselves at risk when we are hunting. We just sniff out someone who is dreaming, and then we wake them up to say goodbye. So as you lay in your bed, hearing the howling in the distance, and feeling the shivers run down your spine, remember this: the werewolf is not a myth. We are real, and we are among you, waiting to strike. Sweet dreams, if you dare to sleep. What was this thing? In 1979, I was a college graduate, traveling south through Canada on my way to visit a friend in Grafton, North Dakota. As I drove just outside the small town of Niverville, something bizarre and terrifying happened that I will never forget. I remember the snow was falling lightly, coating the trees and the roads with a thin blanket of white. I was enjoying the peaceful scenery when I saw something strange out of the corner of my eye. It was something that looked like a pale, bony figure standing in the woods just off the road. At first I thought it was just my imagination, but as I drove past, I saw it move. It turned its head toward me, and I got a glimpse of its face. It was thin and gaunt, with large, dark eyes, and no hair whatsoever. But what shocked me the most was that it had two large, branching deer antlers growing from its head. I immediately panicked and sped up, hoping to put as much distance between myself and that creature as possible. But as I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw that it was following me. It moved with an eerie grace, its antlers bobbing as it ran on its stick-like legs. I drove as fast as I could, but the creature seemed unnaturally tireless. It just kept coming, always staying just behind my car. I was terrified, and my heart was pounding. I had no idea what I was dealing with, or why it was chasing me. But the chase went on for miles, from Niverville in Canada, through the countryside, eventually crossing the border into North Dakota. While I dealt with border security, I couldn't see the creature anywhere, but when I got back to driving, there he was again. We raced through deserted roads and small towns, somehow managing to evade other drivers on the way. They all looked at me like I was crazy as I would swerve to avoid hitting the creature when it ran out in front of me. I began to suspect that I was the only one seeing the hideous, gaunt thing. Finally, after literally hours, I approached Grafton and the creature ran off into the woods, finally leaving me alone. All I know is that the final stretch of my journey was quiet and lonely, in a good way. I have never seen that creature again, but the memory of that night still haunts me today. I don't know what that thing was, or why it was following me, but I know I never want to experience anything like that again. The thought of it chasing me down still freaks me out to this day. Problem in Pinkney. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I live in Pinkney Township, Missouri, and something terrifying is happening here. There is a white-furred werewolf that has been preying on local birds and squirrels. It sounds like this is from a horror movie, but I swear it's true. The first time I saw it, I was walking home from a late shift at work. I heard a strange rustling of leaves, and suddenly the werewolf appeared before me. I froze in fear as its glowing eyes locked on mine. Its teeth were sharp, and its fur was matted with blood. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was trapped in place, as if under its spell. The werewolf growled, and I knew that I was its next target. Luckily, my neighbor Bill spotted me from his window and came rushing out to my aid. He yelled and threw rocks at the werewolf until it finally disappeared into the night. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I was safe. But then the werewolf appeared again and again, preying on helpless animals and tormenting my neighbors. I started having nightmares about it, and I couldn't sleep at night. I felt trapped and helpless, as if I were the next on the werewolf's list. I tried to tell people about what I saw, but nobody would believe me or Bill. I mean, at first they all thought I was crazy, that it was just my imagination running wild. But after a while, a few of them started to come back to me and admit they'd seen it too. I mean, it's hard to miss when it's nearby, with its bright white fur. And the fact that it stands as tall as a man when it's reared up on its hind legs the way it seems to be able to do. Sometimes at night, I still hear its growls, and its footsteps outside my window. I don't know how much longer I can take it. Pinkney Township no longer feels safe to me, and I fear it may never again. The Goat Man of Minnesota. My boyfriend and I had been dating for several months, and we often found ourselves parked alone in the woods, talking privately, in the front seat of my mother's car. This was a calm, quiet night, and we were enjoying each other's company, when we heard a strange noise coming from behind the car. We both turned to look, but we didn't see anything at first. It was when we heard it again. This time we saw something moving in the darkness. A weird-looking goat was standing on its hind legs and peering into one of the backside windows, staring at us with its black beady eyes. We were both completely shocked and confused. We both froze, completely stunned by what we were seeing. The goat continued to stare at us unblinking. And then, suddenly, it screamed. That goat screamed like a woman, a high-pitched sound that sliced through the stillness of the night. It was a sound like nothing I'd ever heard before, and I felt chills run down my spine. We watched in terror as the weird-looking goat ran away, still standing on its hind legs, and screeching in fear. We were both shaking and pretty overwhelmed. "What kind of a goat lives in a forest?" she asked me. "What kind of a goat runs on its hind legs?" I asked her back. We didn't know what to do next. We were alone in the woods with no idea what else was out there, watching us from the darkness. We decided to leave immediately, and we drove out of there as fast as we could. We were both silent the whole way, too scared to speak. That night, we both knew that there was something out there, something that we couldn't explain or understand. We never went back to that spot again, and we never spoke of what we had seen to anyone. Ugliest Sasquatch ever. I was sitting at my dining room table trying to enjoy a quiet night at home, looking at stuff on my phone. My wife was out with friends, so I decided to have some alone time. I quickly became restless and found my gaze wandering to the window, looking outside into the darkness. That's when I saw it. The ugliest human face I had ever seen was peering into my window. It was twisted and grotesque, with a snarling mouth and eyes set deep in its head. I was so startled that a scream escaped my lips before I could even think to stop it. But as soon as the scream left me, something strange happened. The face lifted up into the air, popping up so high that I could no longer see it. Instead, I saw the immense body of the most hideous Sasquatch I had ever seen in my life. I couldn't believe it. I had heard tales of Bigfoot from my father, who had grown up in the area and had always talked about the sightings. But I had never believed it was real, until that moment. This Sasquatch was taller than any man I'd ever seen, easily 7 feet tall, and covered in fur that was matted and unkempt. Its face was contorted with anger, and I could see its breath coming out in heaving puffs in the cold night air. As it lumbered off into the forest, I felt a deep sense of unease settle over me. What else was out there, lurking in the shadows just out of sight? I couldn't shake the fear that had grasped me, and I found myself being paranoid and afraid, even in the safety of my own home. From that night on, I always keep my blinds closed, even during the daytime. I've already seen too much, and I don't ever want to see that face again. My husband was replaced by aliens. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I never thought one UFO sighting could change my life so drastically. But ever since my husband saw that strange object in the sky, he's been acting different. The way he looks at me, touches me, and even talks to me has changed. And I'm not sure it's in a good way. It's almost like he's not the man I married. Before the sighting, our marriage had been experiencing a rough patch. We were going through the motions, barely speaking to each other, and the passion was completely gone. But then he had his UFO experience, and then everything changed. At first I thought it was a good thing. After all, he was suddenly more attentive toward me, pouring on the compliments, and showering me with affection. I don't want to get too private, but our sex life improved significantly. He was like a completely different lover, almost as if he were someone else entirely. But gradually I started to notice little things that seemed off. His eyes would glaze over when we talked. He began to repeat himself. Sometimes he didn't seem to recognize me at all. And then there were the nightmares. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, muttering something about aliens. The final straw came when I found a strange device hidden in our bedroom. It looked to me like some sort of alien technology. When I confronted him about it, he denied knowing anything about it, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. I'm convinced that my husband has been replaced by something. An alien, maybe? A doppelganger, perhaps. Whatever it is, I no longer feel safe or comfortable around him. I know it sounds crazy, but I want my marriage annulled. I just want to get as far from him as possible before it's too late. Anything could happen. Who knows what these aliens are capable of? All I know is that I don't want to be a part of it. The strange, unnatural howling. It had been a quiet night, or so I thought, until I heard the howling. At first it was just a faint noise in the distance, but it grew louder and more persistent as the minutes ticked by. It sounded like it was coming from just outside my house, and it was unlike any noise I had ever heard before. The howling went on for hours, but I didn't dare leave the safety of my home. I was too scared to even look out the window, and I spent the entire night huddled under my covers, praying that the noise would stop. The next morning I ventured outside to see if I could find any clues as to what had caused the disturbance outside my home. As I walked toward where I had heard the howling, I felt a pain in the pit of my stomach. The air was eerily still, and the silence was deafening. It wasn't until I reached the edge of my property that I saw something that made my blood run cold. Right there was an upright standing dogman, watching me with its sharp golden eyes. I was frozen with fear, unsure of what to do next. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The dog man just stood there, watching me, as if it was waiting for something. And then I remembered something I'd been told about the dog man. They were said to howl when someone was about to die, like they could sense death coming in the way they say banshees do. Had someone passed away during the night? I decided to investigate, and as I walked down the street, I noticed that my neighbor's house looked empty. I went closer, and I saw that a wreath was adorning her door, and I knew in my heart that she must have passed away. The dog man had known. He knew before I did. It's a haunting thought that this creature, with its howling, had somehow been mourning her passing. It was a force of nature crying out in its own pain and grief. And I knew then that I had lived through something otherworldly, something that I would never forget. Sasquatch broke up our marriage. I can still remember that night like it was yesterday. My husband and I had been sitting outside on the back porch, enjoying a glass of wine and the cool breeze of the evening. We had been chatting and laughing when I heard something rustling in the bushes behind us. At first, I brushed it off as an animal, but then I saw it. There was a Sasquatch standing there, watching us. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I turned to my husband, who was sitting beside me. "Do you see that?" I asked, pointing to the creature. He looked at me, completely unaware of what I was talking about. "See what?" he asked. "The Sasquatch. It's right there," I exclaimed, pointing once again. He turned to look, but insisted that he saw nothing there. No Sasquatch, no rustling bushes, nothing. He just looked at me like I was crazy. As I watched the creature leave through the bushes, I knew what I had seen. I knew it was real. That meant either my husband was the crazy one, or else he was gaslighting me. From that moment on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with my husband. Whenever I brought up the Sasquatch incident, he would get defensive or brush it off completely. It was like he was hiding something from me. I became obsessed with finding the truth. I ordered cameras online to put up around our property, convinced that I would catch a glimpse of the Sasquatch that way. But before those cameras arrived, I saw my husband outside, talking to the creature as if they were old friends. I really could not believe my eyes. Then when he came in and I confronted him about it, my husband denied everything. He told me I was imagining things, that I was going crazy. But I knew what I had seen. I couldn't stay with a man who was keeping secrets from me, who was lying to my face. I filed for divorce, and as I sat in the courtroom, I couldn't help but wonder what else my ex-husband was hiding from me. What else was out there, lurking just out of sight? It was a terrifying thought, but I knew I had to move on and find someone else who would be honest with me. I had to face it. Bigfoot broke up my marriage. The dirt hole in the forest. We were just a group of curious boys, out exploring the woods behind our neighborhood. We had heard all kinds of stories about what might be lurking in there, but we never believed any of them, until now. It didn't take us long to stumble upon the freshly dug grave. At first we were scared and tried to back out slowly, but then our curiosity got the better of us. We approached the grave and started digging. It was hard work, but we kept going, little by little, until we finally broke through the surface. It wasn't that long until we found someone down there. Someone pale and lifeless. We each took turns listening for a heartbeat, and none of us heard one. This guy was a goner. And then, suddenly, this body turned over on its side, like it was trying to get comfortable. We backed away fast, too freaked out to even scream in fear. If that thing was alive but asleep, we didn't want to wake it. Backing off to where we felt we could quietly have a conversation, we asked each other how that guy could still be alive when he had been buried under the ground when we got there. Also, how could he be alive when he had no heartbeat? I don't remember who said it, but we all instantly realized it was the truth. This had to be some kind of zombie or vampire. He, or it, was lying there, somehow oblivious to our presence. It rolled over onto its back again, stretching a little and yawning before returning to slumber. Its pale skin looked like it was made of marble. We were pretty scared, but we knew what we had to do. One of my buds grabbed a thick enough fallen branch off the ground and started shaving one end down to a point with his pocket knife. We closed in on the vampire, fear creeping through our veins. We needed to bury that stake in this guy's heart. That's what we needed to do. I was the strongest of the group, so the branch was handed to me, and I held it over my head, wondering if I had the strength to single-handedly drive it through the creature's heart. I swung down as hard as I could, and as I was about to hit the chest with the stake, he awakened, and with lightning speed, had my wrist held tight in his hand, his eyes locked on mine. The fight was over quickly. We were no match for this undead thing. Not even all of us together. And that is how I became a vampire. That's how we all did. What's your story? How do you explain this one? I was alone in our home finishing up some work on my computer when I heard a noise from our front door. I checked the time and wondered if perhaps my husband had come home early from work. As I got up to check, I saw a man standing in the doorway. It was my husband, or so I thought. He was dressed in his usual work attire, but there was just something different about him. His face seemed pale, and his eyes looked vacant. The air around him was heavy with tension, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was just not right. "Hey, honey, I thought you were coming home later," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I got done early," he replied, his voice sounding distant. "I'll go change in the bedroom." I watched as he walked past me and into our bedroom. I tried to shake off the eerie feeling that had crept over me, but nothing seemed to work. As I heard him rummaging around in our closet as if he didn't know where things were located, I realized that things were getting stranger by the second. What was happening to my husband? Was he okay? I decided to check up on him. Maybe he needed some help. But as I walked down the hallway, something stopped me in my tracks. The sound of an engine revving in our driveway had me looking out the window and realizing that my husband was pulling up in his car. My heart stopped. Who was in the bedroom then? I hadn't heard anyone leave. With trembling hands, I approached the bedroom door and pushed it open. The room was empty, and I was alone. Nothing had been disturbed. But the air still felt heavy, and that weird tension remained. I don't know what had happened, or who had been in the house with me. All I knew was that I was scared. I was very scared. And for the first time in my life, I realized that fear can come from the most unexpected of places. I was a ghost before I was born. I know this might sound crazy, but hear me out. I remember being a ghost before I was born. For my entire life, I've had this strange feeling that I existed before I was conceived. It's like I have these memories that belong to someone else, but someone who was still me. I know that ghosts are often thought of as being the spirits of the dead, lingering remnants of people who have passed on before us. But I don't think that's true. I think ghosts are actually the spirits of those yet to be born. Think about it. The world is full of energies and spirits that we can't see or understand. What if some of those energies are the souls of people who've not yet entered this world. What if we're all ghosts in some way? This might sound like nonsense to you, but to me, it feels like the most real thing in the world. I remember feeling like I was hovering over my parents before I was born, watching them go about their lives. It was like I was a part of them, but not a part of them at the same time. I couldn't communicate with them, or interact with them, but I somehow knew them intimately anyway. And then one day, my soul was suddenly pushed into my physical body, and I became a living, breathing human being. But I know deep down that there was a part of me that never left that ghostly state. I think that's why I've always felt like I don't quite belong in this world. Now trust me, I know that this all sounds like some crazy conspiracy theory, but I truly believe that there is more to life than what we can see and touch. Maybe ghosts are just one aspect of that. Maybe they're the part of us that hasn't yet been born into this world. The Well with the Wailing Voices. When we stumbled upon the old well in the woods outside of Isabella, Minnesota, we were both fascinated and terrified. The well looked ancient, its walls made of stone that looked like it had been there for generations. We could barely hear the sound of water at the bottom, but it was deep enough that we couldn't see down there. As we leaned in, we realized that we could hear something else as well, what sounded like voices. They were distant, and the sound echoed eerily up from the depths of the well. We strained to listen, but the voices were just out of reach, too muffled and indistinct to make out what they were saying. As we stood there, frozen in fear and fascination, we heard movement in the bushes behind us. Our hearts racing, we spun around, only to find that there was nothing there. But the voices in the well were getting louder, as if in response to our fear. We could make out more distinct sounds, whispers, murmurs, and occasionally, little bursts of laughter. Despite our mounting terror, we were inexplicably drawn to that well. Our curiosity was piqued, and we were compelled to lean in, closer. We strained to hear what the voices were saying, but then their tones shifted, becoming more urgent, as if they were shouting or wailing in agony. The voices had ensnared us, drawing us inexorably toward the well's edge. As we leaned in closer and closer, still trying to discern their secrets, we both screamed as we were suddenly pulled down toward the dark and forbidding depths below. Barely resisting the evil force sucking us down, we broke free and ran away from there. It was a place that we never wanted to return to, and so we never did. Until I was an adult, that is. I wanted to go back and find that well and see how much of my childhood memory was real and how much was in my imagination. Well, I spent the better part of a sunny Saturday wandering through those northern Minnesota woods, and I couldn't relocate the well for the life of me. Maybe I was looking in the wrong location, or maybe someone got rid of that horrid thing. In either case, I guess I'm sort of glad I couldn't find it again. Something tells me that maybe it really was the entrance to hell. The big bad wolf made my parents stop loving me. I was only 8 years old when it happened, but I remember it vividly. It was a warm summer night in the Pennsylvania countryside, and I was playing in my backyard with my dog, a golden retriever named Treasure. Suddenly I heard a rustling in the bushes and my dog barked. I turned to see what had caught his attention, and that's when I saw it. A wolf, standing on its hind legs, not very far away from us. I froze, terrified, as the wolf raised one finger to his lips, signaling for me to be quiet. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A wolf, standing on two legs like a human right in front of me. And what's more, he had hands with fingers. The wolfman thing hesitated for a moment, staring at me, with eerie yellow eyes. And then he took off with one arm wrapped around the neighbor's cat. The poor thing meowed loudly, but the wolf didn't seem to care. He was fast and agile, moving through the trees effortlessly and disappearing quickly. I was too stunned to move for what felt like an eternity. When I finally gained the courage to breathe again, I ran inside to tell my parents what I had seen. But they didn't believe me. They thought it was just my imagination running wild. The next day, when the neighbor was going around asking if anyone had seen her cat, I told my story about the big bad wolf telling me to be quiet as he stole that cat. For some reason, nobody believed me, and they searched my room to see if I had buried the cat under my dolls or something. They said I knew the cat was missing before everyone else, so I must have been the one who did something to that cat. I'm not sure what they were looking for in my room, but the neighbor's cat wasn't there. I already told them it was with the big bad wolf with the long bony fingers. My parents never really treated me the same way again after that, and it felt like they trusted me less, and loved me less too. For years, I kept the memory to myself, too afraid to talk about what I'd seen, knowing that it had made my parents stop caring about me. The rest of my childhood was markedly different and far lonelier, which was fine. I got used to it. But as I grew older and my interest in the unknown grew, I started to research and explore the possibility of werewolves and other supernatural creatures. Now, as an adult, I still can't explain what I saw that night, but I know it was real. I know that it wasn't just my imagination. To this day, I still can't shake the memory of that eerie wolf holding the neighbor's cat under his arm as he ran off into the darkness. The UFO visit that changed my life. I'm going to tell you the story about why I quit crime and cleaned my life up. It's a story about a UFO from the future. I'm sure you're already thinking that I'm crazy. I don't blame you. I'm not sure if I believe it myself, but I can't deny what happened to me. I met my great-grandson on a flying saucer. He told me that the aliens are actually future humans. It started for me with some strange sightings in the sky, night after night, behind my house. At first I thought they were planes or helicopters, but they moved too quickly and erratically to be any kind of aircraft I'd ever heard of. Then one night, I saw a bright light hovering outside my window, and suddenly I felt myself being lifted off the ground. The next thing I knew, I was inside some spacecraft, surrounded by beings that looked nothing like us. Their eyes were large and black, and their skin was strange and slippery to the touch. They spoke to me in a language I couldn't understand, but I was reading this strange vibe off them that they seemed to know everything about me. That was when my great-grandson appeared. He looked sort of like me, but with a few differences, and at least he spoke to me in English. He said that they were humans from the future, and they had come back in time to study us. He claimed that the aliens were us, evolved in the distant future, to a point where we had moved beyond our current state of existence. But then he said something that really bummed me out. He told me that he was the last of my bloodline. He told me that everyone else in my family had died out, or would die out, and that he was my only descendant. He even showed me my own name in his family tree, generations into the future. I was bummed out at the thought of my family line being lost to time, but my great-grandson urged me to keep living, to make the most of my time before their fate was sealed. He told me to try to be a better person, a person that his descendants could be proud of. And then, just like that, he was gone, and I was back in my room. I never saw another UFO again, but I know what I experienced. It caused me to change how I live my life entirely. I know that my great-grandson was telling the truth, and it terrifies me to think about what the future holds. The Silver Frisbee. It was a beautiful day outside, The sun was shining, and the birds were chirping. I decided to go outside and sit on the back porch to enjoy the weather. As I was sitting there, I saw something unusual in the yard. A silver frisbee laying on the ground. I got up from my chair and I walked over to pick it up. I reached down and grabbed it, but the moment I did, it started to rise off the ground under its own power. I was shocked, and I remember watching it in disbelief. As it started to fly away, my heart raced as I watched the strange silver object soar higher and higher into the sky. It moved at an incredible speed, darting between the clouds and vanishing from sight. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was strange. I went back inside to grab my phone and take a picture of the object, but when I came back, the frisbee was gone. I searched the skies and the ground, but I found nothing. I began to wonder if I had really seen what I thought I saw. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But no, I was sure I had seen the frisbee that had flown off. From that day on, I really couldn't stop thinking about what it was that I had witnessed. I searched the internet for similar stories and watched videos of mysterious phenomena in the sky. Was I the only one to have seen it? What was it? And where did it come from? The thought of the unknown variety of mysterious creatures out there leaves me feeling uneasy and on edge. I don't know what to expect from the world anymore, and I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched from above by something unnatural and terrifying. UFOs bear the souls of the departed. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I know you may not believe me, but I promise you that every word of what I'm about to tell you is true. You see, one fateful night about 4 years ago, I found myself enduring the most bone-chilling experience of my life. It was the dead of night, and I was tossing and turning in my bed, unable to fall asleep. The wind was howling outside, shaking my windows violently. I tried my best to ignore it, but it seemed as though something was calling out to me, urging me to peek outside. Finally, I gave in to my curiosity and I rose from my bed. As I looked outside, I saw a bright light illuminating the sky, hovering ominously over my neighbor's house. For a moment, I stood rooted to the spot, unable to believe what I was seeing. As the light grew bigger and brighter, I started to wake up and realized that this was no ordinary occurrence. The light approached my house, and I could see the silhouette of a metallic object that I could only describe as a UFO. The craft landed silently in my backyard, and my heart raced as I cautiously went downstairs and stepped outside. If you think it's weird so far, don't worry, I'm only getting started. To my utter surprise, I saw that the occupants of the craft were none other than 3 deceased U.S. presidents: George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and John F. Kennedy. Now obviously at first I thought it was impossible, but as they stepped out of the craft and spoke to me, I felt deeply and emotionally that this was real, and I stood there, saluting the 3 great men, tears of patriotism in my very wet eyes. As I tried not to weep, they told me that they had been sent by God, who had a message for me alone. They promised to reveal the truth about the afterlife and lead me to the location of heaven itself. As I followed them into the craft, I felt a sense of peace and calm I had never experienced before. The craft ascended higher and higher into the sky, and the presidents took off their masks, revealing skeletal faces. I knew this was not going to end well, and my heart pounded as they revealed the truth about the afterlife. They told me that heaven was, in fact, located in outer space. They said it was a beautiful place where the souls of the deceased were transported to spend eternity. However, they warned me that I could not tell anyone else about the location of heaven, for fear of chaos and mass panic. I could scarcely believe what I was hearing. How could this be true? Just as I was beginning to question my sanity, the presidents turned to me and said, "Remember, this must be kept a secret, or else you will suffer the consequences." As soon as those words left their mouths, I found myself back in my bed. I was frightened, unsure if what I had experienced was a dream or reality, but the truth became clear when, over the next year, I lost my wife and my job for refusing to keep quiet about JFK showing me the location of heaven. I know it might seem crazy, but I cannot tell a lie. The entities that drove the UFO were none other than the reanimated skeletons of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and John F. Kennedy. I mean, why would I lie about such a thing? So, dear listener, the next time you find yourself gazing into the vast expanse of the night sky, remember that there are some secrets that are best left undiscovered. This is the giant kitten. He's got some real name, but nobody ever uses it because he's the kitten. Here's the hellscape I'm trying to subsist in somehow, with that red sun from the Canadian wildfires. But the kitten is my reason for getting out of bed in the mornings. When we first got him, he was tiny and had an allergy to chicken, which is in almost every kind of cat food. He had to go on an expensive diet, but you see, it worked, and now he's a giant kitten. When you have a sick little guy and he grows up big and strong, he becomes the center of your life, like this guy is the sun that I revolve around. I won't lie that when you guys donate, what doesn't go to food and bills goes directly to this little guy here. Oh, that was a kitten noise. He was saying hello. He has a $50 a month temptations habit, and you don't want to get on his bad side when he doesn't get his snacks. So to our channel members, thank you for helping me keep the giant kitten here with me. He sits right next to me while I make every episode. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.